Welcome to the class, Diverse Women Writers, and Sociology 1020, which is Social Problems Learning Community. This is going to be an introduction to the terms that are going to be important to the readings and also some questions that I want you to keep in mind while doing the readings. I'm also going to give a brief overview of the contents within them and what I find the most important within the text or videos that I have included. The topics within this class and within these lessons are going to be about disability, war, and how masculinity affects both of these concepts. Some terms that I want to define are impairment and disability. Disability is when the impaired body comes up against the environment or in circumstances that limit that body's ability to function. Impairment is the part of the body which is unable to function. This separation between these two definitions, impairment and disability, have to do with the social model, which is built around the idea that the primary barriers to equality and freedom for disabled people aren't due to impairment, as in the physical inability to do something, but is in fact because of social barriers, that the world is not designed or allowed for disabled bodies to access them. This differs from the medical model, which sees the body itself as the source of disability. Another important term that I want you to keep in mind is normate, which is a fantasy image of the perfect body with perfect health, beauty, and functioning. Another is supercrip, which is a title given to the heroic disabled character within narratives. You will run into this idea in the readings that you will do. Lastly, I want you to remember and think about the concept between independence and interdependence. Interdependence is defined as the belief that we are all connected, that contrary to belief systems, independence is not the most important thing, but is in fact the ability to connect and take care of each other, which is the most important thing. Another thing I want you to keep in mind as we read is just the understanding of the military, as in the US military, as an environment that is hypermasculine, that is very coded male, and is for men. So the things that I want you to be reading and watching this week start with a video, which is by Judy Heumann, an activist who was a part of the disability rights movement, and her TED Talk outlines the timeline and the motivation behind the movement and how it progressed. This will give you some context for the reading that you will do afterwards, which is from the book Accessible America, A History of Disability and Design. I have you read both the introduction and the first chapter. The first chapter is called Progress Through Prosthetics, Limbs, Cars, Houses, and the American Dream, which details how World War II veterans were treated after they came home from war and how this generation of men was treated very differently to previous war veterans who survived wars, and how very specifically their gender and the narrative around men and masculinity was very shaped and very cultivated to create an independent version of men. In order to still be seen as a masculine man, independence was the most important thing to them. So that is why there is a lot of pressure and talk about cars and prosthetics and the ability to take care of oneself, which intersects very interestingly with other genders. There's also a lot of emphasis within the text about how this independence was based in the home and not in public spaces, which we see when the disability rights movement happens, that this moves into public spaces, that people who are disabled want to enter society and be allowed to interact with the world. Before this, World War II veterans are not pressured and not helped in any way to be in public spaces, but instead be independent within a home. I have a small clip from a movie from 1950 that shows a quadriplegic actor who is Marlon Brando, so he's not actually quadriplegic, and about a man who is adjusting to society and the relationship that he has with his wife. And the clip of it really shows what these different accessibility items would have been, how the cars would have looked, and also the emphasis on Marlon Brando's masculinity within the clip. So think about that. I also have some reading from sociology textbook, which is Gender, Ideas, Interactions, and Institutions. This chapter covers men and masculinity, specifically the pressures that current society has on men. Then I have some questions that I want you to answer. Overall, I have a couple questions that I want you to keep in mind before you start the reading. What does war do to your body, physically and mentally? The reading that I have included focus specifically on physical disabilities, but I want you to also think about invisible disabilities, how PTSD or trauma that these men have seen would affect their lives. How does your country take care of you when you are disabled? How have both of these questions changed over time, depending on which war we're talking about? What do you think changed between World War II and the 1970s when the disability rights movement happened that really changed people's relationships between independence and interdependence? And finally, if you don't have control over your autonomy in life because of an inaccessible world, what happens to your relationship to your government? So good luck with the reading. I know it's a lot, but it's really interesting. So then I'll see you in part 2.